Good evening, everybody. Welcome to all of you. It is really good to see so many familiar faces beginning to fill my screen, and also, of course, a number of new ones too. My name is Guli Francis-Dehqani, and I'm the Bishop of Chelmsford and the lead bishop for housing in the Church of England. In the last 4 years, since the Coming Home report was published by the Archbishop's Commission on Housing, Church and Community, we've been holding periodic events online to discuss the challenges and the opportunities of providing decent, affordable housing on church land as an expression of our mission and ministry. And some of you have been on that journey with us. This evening, our focus is going to be in particular on Glebe land. And this, you'll be aware, I'm sure, is land that's owned by the Church of England in plots up and down the country. It's held in trust by diocesan boards of finance and used to generate income to pay clergy stipends. Now, most glebe land is agricultural, but some of it can be developed, including for affordable housing. So what is it that we can learn from where this has been done successfully? As many of you know, there are a number of financial, legal and local challenges to using glebe land for affordable housing. As registered charities, dioceses are legally required to maximise returns from their assets. If they want to provide affordable homes rather than full market price housing, the financial return will usually be lower. So how can this predicament be overcome? To further complicate matters, the disposal of glebe land is governed by the Church Property Measure 2018, which requires specific consents and procedures, adding legal complexity and time to the development process. And although some local people support more affordable homes, there's always going to be others who vociferously oppose any new house building. So how can these hurdles be surmounted and new residents successfully integrated into existing communities? These are some of the themes that we're going to be exploring this evening, and I'm delighted that we have 3 speakers with an abundance of expertise and experience to share with us. Each one of our speakers is going to give us a 10-minute presentation, one after the other, before we go into 3 different breakout groups around each one of those speakers. So you'll be able to choose which one that you want to join, so that you can ask questions and discuss any points in further detail. The breakout time is going to last for around half an hour before we return to the plenary for some short feedback from each group. And that means that if you find yourself torn between 2 or indeed 3 groups, you'll at least get a flavour of the ones that you've missed. The final part of this evening will be a reflection that we'll hear on tonight's event from Bishop Hugh Nelson, about whom I'll say a little bit more later on. And I should say that we are absolutely aiming to end at 7:30. We're always keen to be prompt with these issues, with these meetings. So promise you that we'll do our best to finish promptly this evening as well. Before we continue, I'm going to suggest that we hold collectively together a moment's quiet to remember, particularly in our hearts and our minds, those who are most impacted by the decisions that we take around our use of land and how we want to be part of addressing the housing crisis in this nation, and in particular to pray for any this evening who are homeless or in temporary or a poor accommodation. So a moment's quiet, and I'll then say the prayer, which is the collect for today, before we continue with our programme. Let us pray. Almighty God, whose only Son has opened for us a new and living way into your presence, give us in all that we do pure hearts and steadfast wills, so that we may worship you in spirit and in truth. through Jesus Christ, your Son, our Lord, who is alive and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God, now and forever. Amen. So our first speaker this evening is Laura Atkinson, whose topic is creating housing communities on Glebe land. And she's going to be talking in particular about a case study in Roxwell in Essex. Laura is the Senior Rural Housing Enabler and Community-Led Housing Advisor for the Rural Community Council of Essex, which supports rural communities to remain sustainable. For the last 8 years, she's worked closely with parish councils, housing associations, local authorities, and other key partners, including my own Diocese of Chelmsford, to help deliver affordable housing that reflects the needs of local people. Laura, I'm delighted you're here, and I'm going to now hand over to you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. I'm just going to share my screen, if I may. One moment. Hopefully everyone can see that. So thank you very much for having me. My role as Rural Housing Enabler is an impartial advisor role. And this role of the Rural Housing Enabler, I'm actually part of a very large and very active network with our body, national body, ACRE, which is Action with Communities in Rural England. So if something I say today resonates with you and you're not in Essex, do reach out, because there's probably a Rural Housing Enabler near you that you can contact to discuss how they can support you. I'm going to give you a brief overall overarching view of affordable housing development in Essex as my role, and in particular one scheme in a village called Roxwell, which is just outside Chelmsford. So my role is really to advise and support communities with a view of looking at their own local housing need and looking to see if they want to be part of a development or support a development of affordable housing for people with a strong local connection. I liaise impartially between the communities, the local authorities and other partners such as housing associations, and we always put the community at the heart of every decision that we make. The schemes are typically small scale, and we utilise the rural exception site policy, which allows the protections to be prioritised and safeguarded in perpetuity for those with a strong local connection to that parish. So the rural exception site policy is a very tight policy which many local authorities have. Each are slightly different, but it is in the National Planning Policy Framework. And it's around a plot of land that is either well related to or abutting a development boundary of a small rural village. And the aim of the sites are really to provide affordable housing. That is the primary aim, with perpetuity arrangements so that the affordable housing is not lost. You are allowed to have a small amount of open market on these sites, but usually it's only allowed if it's required for cross-subsidy purposes. And the development is really restricted in size and tenure to what need it is that is identified for that particular parish. Land often needs to come forward at below market value to make the schemes viable, because we don't have the economies of scale with these types of projects to do anything else. The Section 106 on the land provides the legally binding agreement in perpetuity, but the parish council is really the one that leads the process. Roxwell is a rural village situated 4 miles west of the city of Chelmsford. It's a beautiful village, as you can see by the pictures, with a population of just over 1,000, and it supports modest community facilities such as a pub, a church, a school, and a village hall. And whilst it benefits from the proximity to the city of Chelmsford in many ways, it also struggles with exactly the same reason, that it's the high land and house prices can be just too much for those people that live locally. There was concern from the parish council around the affordability of the homes for those with a strong local connection. People who have lived in Roxwell for a long time, who'd grown up there, were being priced out of the village. And this is exactly the question that the parish council posed to us in 2011 when they came to us to say, well, how can they enable those people who grew up in Roxwell to live there, to continue to live there as their needs change in suitable and affordable accommodation. In 2012, they approached the Rural Community Council of Essex to conduct a housing needs survey in their parish. There's a local survey looking at their local housing needs. So it was a survey that went to all the residents in the parish to look at exactly what it is in terms of size, type and tenure that the people of Roxwell truly needed, particularly in terms of affordable housing. With our support, they conducted this survey and it did identify a need for housing. And together with this and other secondary data, they worked with the Rural Community Council of Essex to appoint English Rural as their developer and housing association. The partnership formed to look at suitable sites, and the site finding process of a rural exception site project is really crucial. It's an impartial site finding. It involves the community, and we look at all the different parts of land, parcels of land that might be able to cater for a small affordable scheme. These sites are then cross-checked against policy by the Chelmsford planners, and the preferred option came forward as the Glebe land at Green Lane. And following land negotiations and site layout discussions with the development director at the diocese and Stratton Parker, English Rural successfully negotiated the acquisition of the site. This partnership that formed between Chelmsford City Council, the Parish Council, the Diocese and English Rural Housing Association was an incredibly good and tight working partnership. The Diocese Development Director at that time was hugely supportive and understood the value of such schemes. Following some community consultations to inform the design of the scheme, the planning application was submitted in 2018. The final scheme went through planning in 2019. We also repeated the housing needs survey in 2018 to make sure that our type and tenure and the mix of the scheme was right, because this is not about overdevelopment, this is about developing exactly what that community needed at that time. And some of the discussions had taken a little while, so we wanted to make sure that when it went through planning, we had as much up-to-date data as we could. In the end, the scheme that came forward was 5 affordable rented homes, which you can see more to the left of your screen of the bigger picture, and 2 discounted market sale chalet bungalows, one of which you can see to the right and the other one's a bit further on to the right. The affordable rent, the allocations came off the housing register, but with priority for those with a strong local connection through work, through living in the parish, but also through family members, and were allocated to people with a housing need with that strong connection. The 2 discounted market sale chalet bungalows were sold with a 25% discount of open market value and a discount that was locked in perpetuity. And this served a different purpose. This was a purpose for people living who in the village who wanted to go on the open market, but again, couldn't afford the full market rate of an open market property. These homes were offered out to the community for 3 months first, before they were taken up by local residents, and that discount will stay in perpetuity as we move forward. English Rural applied the principles of the fabric first design and construction. Designing the homes were highly energy efficient, attractive and spacious, and they all have air source heat pumps. There was also sensitive design planned around a small green to ensure that the existing oak trees, which had TPOs on them, were adequately protected. And you can't see the oak trees in this picture, they're to the right of the rock as we're looking at it, but they are there and still protected. And the high levels of insulation in the homes meant that they reduced their energy use and they kept their fuel bills low. So it wasn't a case of that they just were affordable to rent, they were also all affordable to live in as well. All the homes went to residents with a strong local connection to Roxwell, even the discounted market sale ones. The official opening was delayed due to the pandemic, but in late 2020, Her Royal Highness the Princess Royal opened the scheme. And it was a beautiful sunny day. The primary school came out to support. Actually, the most amazing thing was that some of the residents already knew each other because they all were local people. We did a follow-up interview with the family pictured here, Abby, a year later, and this was their quote. And it's, you know, prior to them moving into this home, they had been moving around private rented accommodation, and this just gave the family security and support and allowed her to remain where she grew up with her family and where she went to school. If you want to look at the QR code, you can use your phone probably to do it now, or I'm sure these will be circulated later. There is a video, a case study video that we created of this very scheme. But safe to say, these homes allowed local people to stay where they had their support networks, but in a more supported and affordable way, so that they could keep the community sustainable and thriving. So that's me. Thank you very much. If anyone has any questions or in the breakout room, I can go through them. But otherwise, if you want to reach out separately, then those are my details. Thank you very much.
Laura, thank you so much. Really good to hear about a positive and successful project like that. And for me, particularly pleasing, obviously, because it's in charge of a diocese, but also to see how important partnerships are in the successful delivery of affordable housing on Glebe land. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Kate Cortez, and Kate's going to be talking about developing a diocesan Glebe strategy informed by the Coming Home report. Kate is the Deputy Diocesan Secretary for the Diocese of Truro. She's lead officer for the Diocesan Glebe portfolio, alongside a much wider remit, which includes buildings, environment, and operations. Kate's work background includes 15 years in social housing and with communities of significant disadvantage. So again, Kate, thank you for being with us, and I'm going to hand over to you.
Thank you very much. I'm also pleased to be here, and I'm also going to share my slides, so bear with me. Apologies. Okay, so hopefully that comes through in a sec too. So yes, I'm going to be talking to you about how we developed our Glebe strategy here in Truro. In 2024, I was asked to create a Glebe strategy because we didn't have one. The strategy I created is intended to outline a more deliberate and long-term plan for the use of Glebe in our care, which aligns with the wider strategic priorities of the diocese and the Church of England. It's not about radically changing what we do. The restrictions of the church property measure and the nature of the land, i.e. what size it is, where it is, what it's currently used for, means that whilst we wish to be a force for good, this might not be as dramatic as we might hope. However, we fundamentally feel that we should, as good stewards of this historic asset, seek to do all that we can to ensure that it also achieves its potential to benefit Cornwall and its people, whilst generating funds to support the vital ministry of our clergy. And whilst this is specifically a strategy for Glebe, the ambitions of this strategy can also be applied to the other assets we hold or help others to care for, such as parish land and buildings, school buildings and parsonages. One of the key priorities we adopted with the approval of this strategy was to use Glebe to help deliver the housing Cornwall needs, prioritising quality homes for those in need, those providing key services for local people, and supporting thriving communities. This was explicitly a response to the Coming Home report, so it's not just about delivery of housing, but the delivery of good housing and finding the right partners to achieve this. So this evening I'm going to give you an overview of how we created the strategy, what's in it, and what the impact has been for us thus far. Oh, bear with me, sorry, you've all disappeared. So every diocese is different, particularly in terms of Glebe, the amount of types of land you have, but also the financial position, the resourcing capacity, and this is us. So we have around 2,000 acres, over 240 sites. The largest is 114 acres, but most is a lot smaller. As to be expected, it's scattered, often close to towns and villages. And prior to setting the strategy, we were already selling land for development, including affordable housing, and we were pleased we'd already delivered over 200 houses in the previous years because we have a very proactive land agent. But ultimately, our strategy up until now was one line. It was to generate money for stipend. And so in terms of what the process we followed, firstly, it was about research. I talked to other dioceses, some of you may be in the room that I did, and to the national team, finding out what other people were doing, what they'd done, what worked, and what people were hoping to do. I looked at reports and strategies and guidance from national church and from the local authority and government and NGOs such as the National Trust, the Duchy, the Environment Agency, and luckily for us, the University of Exeter were carrying out research in housing need in Cornwall. I looked at our context, our existing knowledge. What did our land agent know? What mapping and portfolio details do we have, and what have we done today? We had input from our Glebe Management Committee, and I looked at local strategies such as local plans, growth strategy, climate change action plan, nature recovery strategy. And then I went to our stakeholders, both in interviews and group meetings, particularly with registered providers, the local authority, including the portfolio holder, as well as heads of service and environment colleagues, the Wildlife Trust, members of our own governance and advisors such as the Advisor for Rural Affairs. And it was chaired independently, which was really helpful to challenge us. And using the above, I drafted the strategy. I added appendices which had options analysis for each area, such as housing, environment, or community assets. And I worked on the drafts with the Glebe chair, the Diocesan Secretary, the independent chair, our land agent, and then the Glebe Management Committee. And ultimately, it was signed off by our bishops and the Bishops' Diocesan Council. I then developed an action plan, which I'll talk about in a bit. And ultimately, the Glebe Management Committee is responsible for the ongoing monitoring and review of the delivery. In our strategy, we set ourselves objectives, but before the list of objectives at the top, it says where lawful, and we have to remind ourselves all the way through this. But we've still set our objectives around delivery of housing, delivering our environment strategy, providing assets for the community, and ultimately remembering to be good landlords. We need to work with the tenants in a lot of these things to actually to do some of the things we want to do. And all along, remembering best value and the need to generate funds for the stipends, capital stipends fund. It could be asked why we continue to hold Glebe. We could just sell it and use the funds to invest. Financially, this could be argued to provide higher returns, but this strategy isn't proposing that we sell all the land because of these reasons. Because we hold the Glebe land as a balanced investment portfolio to cushion the funds from fluctuations. Capital growth from changes in use, special purchases, and the evolution of planning policy mean the environment is changing, and we may find there's greater value in the future or there's greater value in holding on to it anyway. But also we see good proactive stewardship of Glebe as an opportunity to invest in Cornwall and achieve our missional and strategic objective. And in holding Glebe, we can help maintain a balance in land usage between farming, community and housing, and seek to do good where we can in each of these areas. And ultimately is a historic asset tied to local communities across most places in Cornwall. We have set ourselves KPIs, and I admit this is still work in progress. We've had to be realistic about our capacity to measure and the usefulness of measuring. What would it really show us? The green ones are the things we can already measure, and the red are the things we need to do more about to baseline, and we are in the process of achieving that. We needed to consider the risk. So for all dioceses, number one is the big one, as it should be. We hold the endowment of this land for a reason. But this one can also be disheartening and directly increases the likelihood of the other risks listed. Communities and other stakeholders don't understand the intricacies of the church property measure. Why would they want to, really? Let alone how it interacts with planning laws and local and national policy. And we quite regularly receive angry communications about things we're trying to do now, but we did so beforehand. And it's much easier to deal with being told I'm everything wrong with the Church of England when I know we're trying to do more now. And despite the risks, it's not impossible to do more. As I mentioned earlier, I developed an action plan, and I took the options analysis and mapped it on this grid, looking at how difficult it was to achieve something versus the potential benefit. And that's how we set the priorities. And this is part of the action plan. So it's based on a benefit and achievability. And our top priorities around housing are trying to deliver some supported housing with partners, joint ventures, market-led, because it helps balance the portfolio and enables other decisions around housing and other priorities, and community land trusts, even though in our experience it has been a bit tricky. And this is for the next 2 years, but the strategy is for the longer term. What has helped? So leadership. I love this picture of our Glebe chair. He started about a year ago, 18 months ago, and he's brilliant. He's really on board with the strategy and what we're trying to do. He's enthusiastic and knowledgeable, and is a really positive agent for change. Our bishop and our leadership team around the bishop are very supportive, and it actually just gave me space to do this as well, which is really important. And our Glebe Management Committee have been really supportive and again really engaged, and they've enabled me to bring them with me. Our land agent has been proactive, interested and collaborative, but also wise and raising an eyebrow when I get a bit carried away. I've had great support from colleagues across the church, this forum, other dioceses, the national team, people like Becky Winter and Jonathan, and our legal advisors such as Sarah, who's speaking later. The structures in the organisation, I can work across the organisation, so this is really helpful. It helps break some of the barriers to progress. There's already quite a lot of trust and internal support, which makes it easier. And if I'm honest, we're a small diocese, so it is easier to be a bit more agile and integrated and communicate with others. There are obviously downsides to being a small diocese, but in this case, it has been helpful. And ultimately, our approach, the diocese needs confidence, it needs willingness to give it attention, freedom to think differently, and time to let it have impact. So in terms of impact, the strategy was approved in February this year. And I'm not going to pretend everything changes overnight. We've gone down a lot of rabbit holes, testing which leads where. But in terms of partnerships, we've brought new ones that build on existing models and things we've tried and new things we haven't, and elevated existing relationships. We've worked with communities differently and looking to do more with PCCs and land trusts. And in terms of our priorities, accelerated and amplified the identification of sites suitable for housing and the suitable partners to deliver them. Changes the meeting agenda, the focus of the committee, talking about strategic priorities first, not just operational matters. It's directly reflected in our re-tendering of our Glebe management contract and changed the nature of what we're asking of them. We're looking at different ways of using our land to do good, exploring models of finance, ownership, tenure and usage, and looking at other assets. In terms of money, it is costing us more money in terms of what the agent is being paid to do, and we're investing in baselining Glebe with our partnership with Exeter Diocese. But we've accessed funding through the national church, the local authority, and it increases our eligibility for other grants. And we're always thinking about best value in the background and exploring ways we can push it. I'm going to finish, Jonathan. And also, it is benefiting our reputation and what people think of us. And that's really important because people are beginning to work with us more because they think we're actually serious. Ultimately, it's a journey with lots of wiggles and forks and even dead ends. And we're moving on with our action plan. But I would say the one thing you need, other than actually having some Glebe land, is energy to maintain momentum and to take people with you and keep them with you.
Kate, thank you so much. 10 minutes comes and goes so quickly, doesn't it? And you've packed a huge amount in, helped us better understand, I think, some of the challenges around managing Glebe land and also handling the tension between the financial and the missional needs, which I'm sure it's something that a lot of us recognise. I have no doubt that you'll have raised a number of questions for people, and just a reminder that those who choose your breakout group can obviously bring those to that in just a few minutes' time. But before then, our final speaker is Sarah Outram, who is going to help us to understand practical and legal issues around disposing of Glebe land for affordable housing. Sarah is a partner at VWV, specialising in charity and ecclesiastical property law. She advises her ecclesiastical clients, including a number of dioceses, on a whole range of property matters. These include title investigations, first registrations of church land, purchasing land to use as churchyard extensions, acquisitions, disposals and leases of property, and especially in tonight's context, the disposal of glebe land. So thank you, Sarah, for being with us, and the microphone is all yours.
Thanks very much, and a hard 2 acts to follow, I think. Let me just share. So I wanted this evening you've had lots of practical information about how it's worked for dioceses and the kind of considerations. What I wanted to talk about was to start with some law, but then talk about the consideration of some of the process and the looking at the church property measure in a bit more detail. And then we'll end with some case studies, which obviously we can then cover off a little more in the Q&As if that would help. So the church property measure is a little, so glebe land, as Guli said at the beginning, is vested in the DBF for the benefit of the stipend fund and governed by Part 2 of the church property measure. What this states is that you can't dispose of land, which includes a lease of more than 21 years or a sale, without the consent from the church commissioners. This means that in order to get past that, the DBF needs to obtain a written report on the proposed transaction from a designated advisor instructed by and acting exclusively for the DBF, and having considered the report is satisfied that the terms of the transaction are the best that can reasonably be obtained. I've highlighted the points in bold which are going to be relevant for the slides that are coming up. Given B above, the particular circumstances of a transaction will need to be considered on a case-by-case basis. And there are a number of factors, including, as Kate's explained, local opinion, the size and use of land, what the potential is and what the potential price and value is around things that would really need to be considered, but it's looking at the proposed transaction really as a whole. So there's some examples of what best terms, this seems to be quite a crunch point for what we're really looking at, is what might a diocese be looking at when we're looking at this? And again, it's just to focus on the fact that this is the whole transaction and not just this specific terms that might be looking at. So when you've got, you look at value, obviously that's really important. What's the market value like? What's the value of any offer and the price that's been offered? What does the speed of that disposal look like? Is it simply that actually you're going to get that disposal off the books really quickly, or is there something that means that when you're considering options together, there might be a significant lag time, which might affect the ability for you to be able to get those needed funds within the stipends fund? When you're looking at certainty, that's around really understanding, is the sale and the terms that you're looking at and the buyer going to end in a offer, or is this more of an option? Is this more of a developer wanting to use land for a bit of appraisal, for instance? And that flows into your conditions. When you're looking at your offer and your and the offers that are on the table, which we'll show in the case study in a bit more detail, what are the conditions that attach to the offer? Does this mean actually that some might be more or less satisfactory for the purposes of what we're trying to achieve? And then one thing that we've discussed quite a lot with our diocese clients is around, is there an element in terms of value around mission objectives, furthering the mission of the Church of England, and for all those reasons Kate's talked about, around really reputational and making sure that people understand that the diocese is here and they're trying to use their Glebe portfolio for good. I thought it'd be helpful to set out kind of where some of these decisions happen in the process. So as Kate's explained, there will be a suitability of land and appraisal of kind of the options that you might have. Working with a land agent or engaging a separate surveyor, there might be someone who's going to act as what they call a designated advisor. That's the definition within the church property measure, which has actually come from the changes to the Charities Act. And that surveyor will act as somebody who can kind of guide you through really looking at what your advice is regarding marketing. How are we going to get this stage? Is it actually one that a rural exception is really suitable for? Or is there actually possibility to put this on the open market in order to see if there are any other options available? Once you've followed the surveyor's advice, and there's a separate chart we'll look at in a second, there's then the consideration of the offers that might be on the table. Surveyor then produces its report, which can then be considered by the Glebe committee. So I thought I'd cover marketing briefly. So does your surveyor recommend putting the property on the open market? And this is quite important for the purposes of coming back to that church property measure requirements around what does the where do you get to where you're trying to make a decision, the Glebe trying to make a decision on whether or not these are best terms reasonably obtainable. So if your surveyor recommends putting the property on the open market, then you can consider offers from a selection of bidders. Does the surveyor support the sale, and does the Glebe committee therefore believe these are best terms reasonably obtainable? If the answer to that is yes, then you can proceed to sale. If the answer is no, then you need to apply for consent for the church commissioners. If actually the surveyor doesn't recommend putting it on the open market, but maybe looking at marketing in a different way. So it could be an auction, could be private bidders, could be actually individuals. We sold a property a couple of years ago that was really landlocked, and actually the surveyor in that case decided not to proceed with an open market sale because it was a really difficult plot of land, and therefore actually they wanted to look at some targeted individual approaches first, and actually that resulted in a really successful sale in that instance. It's about relying on your surveyors where possible. If you receive bids, then it's again moving back up to the idea of considering those offers. And if there aren't any bids, then obviously it's looking at other marketing options and what can you do, and is there another way of looking at the land. The timing of the reporting and the surveyors is quite important. So the DAR, which is the report, should be commissioned before a contract is entered into for the disposal. So that's before you get to exchange of contracts, entering into a conditional contract. Also includes option agreements or agreements for lease. So it's quite an early stage, the point where you've got terms agreed and documents have been agreed ideally. If there is no contract, then that is the point, the DAR needs to be provided at completion. And the Glebe committee needs time to review, consider the written report and decide whether those terms that can be the best that can reasonably be obtained. In order to make that decision, and that's not always straightforward, as you can imagine, a record needs to be made carefully showing the decision-making process and the factors which were taken into account. And that can be really important, especially if there are challenges further down the line, for Glebe to really stand behind that decision and the reasons why they might have chosen something which doesn't on the face of it look like it's a higher value, a higher price, sorry, than some of the other decisions. And it brings in some of the other points that we'll talk about shortly. Just a point to note that if a significant period of time has passed between either your initial report or when you first engage a surveyor and a formal report and exchange and completion, it's good practice to go back to your surveyor and ask them simply to update their report and make sure that it's still current. Quite often that can be done can be done via letter, and can also pick up any changes in terms that have been throughout the legal negotiations. So I thought it'd be helpful to cover a couple of case studies. So these are all examples that are amalgamation of things I've curated. So this is agricultural land. This one happens to have some grazing on it, which you can see from my blurry picture, which I stole from the internet. The current land value is 200,000. They've identified that it's not suitable for rural exception site. And after marketing, speaking to their surveyor, there are 3 bids received. So number 1 is a developer who wants to develop the site for a small affordable housing scheme. They've offered 100,000 unconditional offer, but with overage. This is a clawback if if there are certain parameters that are breached over a certain period. Number 2 is a wealthy local landowner offering 200,000, so current land value, as agricultural land, so no changes, but there isn't overage or restrictions. Third is a speculative bid from a commercial developer, 150,000, lots of conditions to completion. So it could be planning or other things that mean that actually it's not a straightforward unconditional sale. So in considering those offers in return, these are the kind of things that everyone would need to consider, along with the surveyors and with the Glebe committee. So number 3, a speculative bid. The conditions may make this sale quite uncertain, and therefore in this fictional incident they decided actually that wasn't really an offer that was suitable. In number 2, which seems like the highest value, there were concerns that the wealthy landowner can't be trusted and actually would try and use the land for something other than agricultural. As there are no overage or restrictions, that means actually that they could be essentially taken out of any, there's no community benefit, and potentially they could be making some more money out of what is glebe land, and therefore that they decided that actually that bid wasn't very successful. In this instance, it is arguable, therefore, that the affordable housing developer is most likely to secure planning and most likely of the 3 to produce housing. It's got the benefit of being affordable. The surveyor can support it on the basis of the additional offers they had, being property marketed, and it helps the community. And it's those kind of things all together that really Glebe committee can help with. There is a second case study which we'll run through in Q&As because I'm a little over time. 2 time, there we go. Where it might not be, where the arguments might not be quite so easily fought. But for the moment, I will hand back. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sarah. We are really strict, aren't we, with our speakers, and I'm really grateful for your graciousness and indeed for bringing clarity to some of the incredible complexities of glebe disposals. So we're now going to go into the breakout groups. I hope that in a moment a window is going to pop up and you can choose one of the 3 groups to join. A team member from the Archbishop's Council Housing Project is going to be moderating each of the groups, and they'll welcome you shortly into those groups. And I will see you back here in just around half an hour. Okay, so welcome back, everybody. I hope that you've had enough time to ask your questions and to discuss your particular topic further. I'm going to now invite each of the moderators to summarise very briefly the discussion from their particular breakout group, after which the speaker will then have just 1 minute to share any supplementary points that they want to share that arose out of the discussion. So we're going to start with group 1, which was with Laura, and I'm going to go over to Becky Winter for the summary, please.
Thank you, Bishop Guli. I've just been busy scribbling in that 30 seconds. We started off grilling Laura with a few more questions about the process involved in rural housing work, rural housing enabling work. You know, do you go to them? Do they come to you? And also thinking about whether it's something that could be aggregated or whether actually it is more individual sites, very community led. We went on to talk about the potential for gypsy and traveller sites. And with that in mind, how do you help ensure public support for schemes when it's obviously challenging in some communities to have affordable housing, let alone traveller community schemes? We spoke about second home ownership and Airbnb and the impact of that on rural communities. And then we went on to speak about how the church can help. What is it that rural housing enablers need from the church? How can we support them? And the key takeaway from that was all about partnerships. You know, get to know each other, connect as much as you can, reach out and find good ways to work together. But one of the things that we all need to work on, certainly in the church, is the time it takes to move forward on development. Sometimes these things are out of our hands, but if there's anything we can do to speed things up, it means you don't risk losing momentum and the faith of the community in a project. And we then went on to talk about ecumenical schemes, and yeah, that's it.
Okay, thank you ever so much, Becky. Laura, is there anything else you want to briefly add?
Well, I think Becky did such a good job there. I'm not sure there's much to add, other than to say that there was a sort of a discussion around how the rural housing enabler role is that constant role within the process, sort of that hand-holding role. And actually that can be really kind of comforting to know that there is somebody there that works sort of between a community and the landowner or the diocese and the developer. So actually there's that factor of kind of, you know, knowing that there's always somebody there who understands the process to help you through it. So it's you know, it's, yes, it can be a slow process, but I think the key thing for me is that partnership working. It's about making sure that, you know, everybody understands the process that exists from both sides, so that there is that smooth process through to completion, so that we can make it as successful as possible.
Thank you very much to you both. We're going to go now to group 2, which was with Kate and Nathan. Nathan Conway is going to give us a summary.
Yes, thank you. So in group 2, it actually ended up being quite a good networking opportunity. So there was quite a few details shared and swapped, and certainly a desire to swap and share information with each other. And provide recommendations for partners who we've been working with on each of our individual projects. There was a discussion about the distinction around charitable objects, a distinction between parish land and glebe land, where for parish land, you know, provided the charitable objects align with the delivery of affordable housing, then that would be sufficient to progress such a scheme. But there are more complexities involved with glebe land, where best value has more facets to consider beyond charitable objects. There was a really nice discussion actually about community engagement and how actually this is for a glebe strategy, there's a real opportunity to engage local communities as part of how we use and bring forward that land. The role of archdeacons and local clergy in facilitating that. But also a recognition that capacity within diocesan teams can be a barrier to do that well. And then finally, just a plug for the housing project grant scheme. Truro Diocese has been a recipient of one of those grants and has proven to be really valuable. And so we've encouraged people to get in touch with us to see how they can be supported as well.
Thank you, Nathan. Kate, anything very briefly to add?
Again, cracking job. I'd just add in, we were talking about how you try and achieve a high level of affordable housing, and some ways you might be able to do it, but it is quite specific depending on the site and the partner. The benefit that we've had working with an agent, for which we could renegotiate the contract to change how they work and to be less operational and more strategic. And that's been really helpful. And just to say, I've sent Jonathan a copy of our strategy, which I'm willing to share with some trepidation if anyone would like it.
Thank you. That's very generous. Thank you, Kate, and also Nathan. So where are we now? We're coming to our third group, which was with Sarah and Tash. Tash Jessen, you're going to summarise.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, we spoke a lot about some of the more technical legal stuff, which Sarah is by means an expert and I am not, and the legal queries in specific situations in different dioceses. And we also discussed all of those different factors which dioceses are considering in different land disposals. So what value means in that situation, the balancing in between the aims of the charity wanting to retain value for clergy stipends in balance with the disposal of land in potential affordable housing offers, and also that mission factor and sort of what that plays into that factoring as a diocese is making that decision. Sarah also went through her second case study, which led to further questions about what an acceptable offer might be on more complex sites. And we just finished with a quick request for suggestions of surveyors.
Thank you very much indeed, Tash. Sarah.
I think I was just very aware that some of the law is particularly tricky in this area, and I was really grateful that so many people came to ask additional questions, but also that it's we're aware that it's difficult to navigate, and the answer you never want is it's on a case-by-case basis, and actually it requires an assessment in each case. But one of the things we really talked about is the importance of professional advisors, not really lawyers, but in terms of surveyors and other people who can really help Glebe committees and guide them through the decision-making process so that it can be properly documented, and they're doing it with proper advice.
Thank you very much indeed, Tash and Sarah. So this evening, we've explored the opportunities and challenges around developing glebe land for affordable housing. But before we close, I've asked a fellow bishop who's been involved in the housing initiative, both locally in his own diocese and nationally, to share a few thoughts about our discussion this evening. Bishop Hugh Nelson is Bishop of St Germans in the Diocese of Truro and is part of the Forum for Church Housing, which brings together all of the C of E entities which are seeking to provide more decent, affordable housing. Hugh spent 13 years living and working in the L'Arche Christian communities, and once ordained, he then worked as a parish priest in Kent for 8 years. He became Bishop of St Germans in Truro Diocese between lockdowns in 2020, and I'm delighted to say that he's going to be taking up his role as Bishop of Worcester in January of next year. Hugh, over to you.
Thank you, Bishop Guli. Thank you all so much for this evening. Remarkable to have 100 people on a, well, now dark September's evening joining in to do this together. And my day today began with a board meeting of St Petrock's, which is the Cornish homelessness charity, and it's ending with some of the solutions to the problems that St Petrock's is dealing with here in Cornwall. Just a couple of kind of closing thoughts from me. And I have to say, first of all, thank you to our speakers. I mean, just spectacular. Huge shout out to Kate from Cornwall, but to all of you, thank you so much for sharing the hard work and the knowledge and the skill that you have with us. Couple of thoughts on what we've heard. I looked up where the word glebe comes from. What's the kind of root of the word glebe? Because I had no idea, and I'm sure some of you already know this, but it's from the Latin word gleba, which means a clod of earth or earth, and that reminds me that we've got another word that we know well. Those of us that read the Bible, that follow Jesus, that means the same thing, and the word is Adama. It means, it's the Hebrew word for earth. It's the stuff from which Adam was made. It's the stuff from which we're all made. And that perhaps reminds us that what we've been talking about today, about glebe, about earthy stuff, about Adama, the stuff from which we're made, brings together the literal ground, the earth on which our churches and our housing is built, and the people, us and those that we serve, who live on top of it. And it strikes me as a kind of reminder, I suppose, that when we talk about things like glebe strategies and glebe land and do the complex, demanding work that we've been discussing, we are all about building flourishing human communities on the bits of earth that we have been given to steward. And so the work that we're doing today, as someone really helpfully put into the chat a bit earlier, is a kingdom stewardship work, not merely about navigating complex law and finance and ecclesiastical frameworks. This is kingdom work that we're doing. And that means, because this is true, I think, of all kingdom work, that we're bringing together a kind of big, bold vision of good housing for the people who find it hardest to access, which is designed for creation and for the community, together with the detailed and often extremely difficult practical, legal and financial frameworks that we've been discussing, some of which act against the big, bold vision that we want to see in action. And I think what I've heard each of our speakers, and I'm sure many of you are doing the same thing. What I hear is that kingdom work in all sorts of areas, but certainly in this housing area, is to do with sitting in that gap, working in that gap between the big, bold vision and the really nitty-gritty, earthy work of making it happen on the ground, literally on the ground. And that's not always easy, is it? And it strikes me, I mean, I've heard three things that are critical to this work in different kind of voices and in different places in the ways that we've been presented with. First of all, it does need a clear vision and it needs persistence. This is not going to happen quickly. It needs us to know why we're doing it and then to stick to it. And that means it requires leadership at every level, including those, and I include here people like bishops and archdeacons and diocesan secretaries, people who get to make decisions about what we do with our land. We've got to win their hearts and minds for this rather than the other things that we might do with it. So that's the first thing, clear vision and persistence, and to persuade people with authority to get on board with this. Second, it needs people with specific skills. We've met some of them tonight, and thank you for being part of this and for helping those of us like me who have not got the specific skills to do the thing that we want to do, to turn the big vision into reality. And the third thing, and perhaps the most important thing that I'm taking away from tonight, this evening, is evidence of this. It needs lots and lots and lots and lots of partnership working between our diocese, between our communities and our churches, between those with skills and those with the energy, and between those who've got authority to make decisions and the people who know actually how to design a plan and make it happen. So thank you for being here this evening and for being part of this partnership as together we try to use our Glebe land for the benefit of the people who live on the earth and who we're all called to serve.
Many thanks indeed, Bishop Hugh, for your thoughts and your insights. And can I just say, I'm really looking forward to collaborating with you more closely as you join the House of Bishops in a few months' time. So where do we go from here? Well, something which will help everyone involved in managing Glebe land is the Good Steward mapping tool, which has been developed by the Archbishop's Council Housing Project together with Knight Frank. This tool maps information from the land registry for church sites and captures a wealth of spatial data, including environmental and land designations, flood zones, heritage assets, and protected habitats, which might constrain any development. But it also includes planning data to identify areas of greatest housing need and development opportunity, as well as local infrastructure and amenities to identify sustainable locations for any new housing. I'm really pleased to announce that just this morning we heard that ESRI has approved the agreement, and so individual licenses can now be issued. Nathan will be writing to Diocese in the next couple of weeks to ask who the named users should be, and that'll be followed up by training them on how to use the tool for managing their glebe and ex-benefice land. We are really excited by the potential that this mapping tool has to improve the stewardship of church land and increase the number of decent, affordable homes built in the years ahead. So all that's left really for me is to thank all of our speakers and also to thank my colleague Jonathan Tame, who's really the force behind organising this event. Our event next term will be in January, so do look out for an email from Jonathan with a date and theme and further details. But thank you to all of you for being here. God bless and enjoy the rest of your evening.